go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. You may be seated. Today is a special day in the church's calendar called Rogation Sunday. And no, it does not have anything to do with Rogaine or the growing back of hair. Rogation Sunday is always the Sunday directly before Ascension, which is this upcoming Thursday. And we'll be having our Ascension Vigil Mass this Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. Everyone is welcome to come out and celebrate this great feast. But the idea behind Rogation Sunday is the word rogare means to intercede or to plead or to ask, to supplicate. And so the church has always seen fit in its wisdom to spend this Sunday and the next 3 days up to Ascension Day, spending its time in prayer and in supplication. And there's been a special focus throughout the history of the church on the blessing of the earth. That at this time of the year, during the spring, as crops are being planted and so on and so forth, that we ask God to bless the earth for His providence and for His care of the world, and that we would be provided for everything that we need. And in the Middle Ages, as a matter of fact, in the Middle Ages, the church would go out and beat the bounds, they would say. They would process throughout all of the parish and through all of the farmlands, blessing all the fields and all the animals for the upcoming season of growth. But that being the case, I think that today's gospel is very much ideal for that symbolic act that we participate in on a yearly basis. Because Christ said, I chose you and appoint you that you should go, and that you should bear fruit. That as we bless the fields and as we bless the ground, and as we anticipate the bountiful harvest that the Lord will bring, that we should see ourselves as a field. We should see ourselves as a means to a bountiful harvest. And today, as we look at our gospel, I want to ask ourselves, what does it mean for us to bear fruit? What does it mean for that fruit to abide? And what should it look like in our lives? Well, to begin answering that question, I want to go to this very familiar saying of our Lord. If you've ever been to a Memorial Day service or a Veterans Day service, I'm sure that you've heard these words. Christ says, greater love has no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends. Now, this week's sermon will be building off of last week's sermon, which was all about love. And I always get a little bit jittery when I preach about love, because we as Americans have a great many misunderstandings about what the meaning of love is. You see, we as Americans, when we hear the word love, we automatically begin applying to it sort of this emotional mentality. Well, when I speak of love from the pulpit, I'm not speaking of some emotion or some passion or some ooey-gooey feeling that you get inside of you. We hear the word and we begin filtering it through years and years of reading romantic books and seeing romantic movies and so on and so forth. We think of the good old hippie days. Love, not war. Well, I'm here to tell you today that what the world means by the word love is not what we mean by the word love. And so a sermon on love requires me now to preach on what love really is. What do we mean when we say the word? Listen to Christ's words once again. Greater love has no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends. No, the Christian understanding of love is not an emotion, it's not a feeling. Rather, it is a sacrifice. The Christian understanding of love is the orientation of your entire person towards the good of another. To leave behind selfishness. To leave behind self-service. and instead to exist as a gift, and to give your whole self as a gift to another person. Sadly, this understanding of love is in many ways entirely foreign to what we think of when we hear the word. But I think that it is this word, it is this meaning of love that gives meaning to the very acts of God within our own world. I think that the place in which I myself began to fully understand what this word love meant in the Christian sense, agape, is when I started having kids. You see, when you're a child, you don't really have that opportunity very often to really give yourself fully to another, to sacrifice yourself for another's sake. And in a similar sort of a way, when you first get married, you love each other, but there's still a lot of infatuation involved in it. You're still on the honeymoon for the first couple of years. But for me, at least, it's when I held that first little baby in my arms. When I found myself getting up in the middle of the night to change diapers. When I had charge of this little child who could do absolutely nothing for themselves, who could not feed themselves, who could not move themselves, who could not wash themselves, who didn't even fully understand the feelings that they were feeling, and their only response could possibly be to cry. But you look at that little baby, and you hold that little baby in your arms, and you realize that you would do anything in the world for that child. And nothing is going to stop you. Whatever sacrifice it takes, whatever pain that you would feel, no matter what, you would do it for them. You see, this is what Christianity means by love. This is the love that God has for each and every one of us. This is the understanding of love that makes sense of a God who would step out of heaven and take on our humanity. This is the type of love that makes sense of a God who would step out of heaven and take on our sufferings. This is the type of love that makes sense of a God who would step out of heaven and be crucified upon a cross and die for our sakes. God's entire orientation is not for himself, but for the good of the other. His entire being of goodness is being poured out on the whole of humanity in a total lack of self-interest, in a total abandonment for each and every one of you. When we speak of love in the church, my friends, this is what we speak of. After all, this is what we celebrate here every single Sunday, is it not? What is the Eucharist but the self-gift of God? God descending from the heavens and saying, "Here I am. I give myself to you fully and freely. My whole self in love. To be taken into you." This is the love that we celebrate as Christians. Now, if this is the case, it forces us to make the next step, doesn't it? Because the epistle of St. John goes just a little bit further. At the very end of our epistle reading today, the apostle said this: "We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, 'I love God,' and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. In his commandment we have from him, that he who loves God should love his brother also." Hear those words. We love because he first loved us. What is the implication but that because he loved us, we love? But do we? A lot of us will go about and talk about how much we love God. But if the apostles' words are true, the question we should then ask ourselves is, do we love our brother? Because the apostle reminds us, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, then he is a liar. And remember what we're speaking of when we say the word love. A total orientation of the self towards the other's good. A life of self-sacrifice and self-service for the good of the other. Do we exhibit that in our lives? And not only that, but we must also ask the question, what does it mean when he says brother? It is so easy for us to limit the meaning of that term, is it not? So many of us spend so much of our lives trying to limit the meaning of the word brother to this person or that person or this group of people or that group of people. Entire political movements sometimes exist simply to limit the meaning of the word brother. But the word brother here is not limited by blood or by genetics or by skin color or by political boundaries. The word brother here is limited by the incarnation itself, which has no limits. The whole of humanity is our brother, because the whole of humanity is the children of God. The whole humanity is our brother, because Jesus Christ himself came down to take our humanity upon him, because Jesus Christ made himself our brother. And because he is the brother to every human being, so you and I are the brother to every single human being. And we are called to love them with the same exact love with which Christ has loved us. It's one of the things that I love so much about being an Anglican. So often we as Americans get caught up with just our own American brothers and sisters, which is true and we should be. But what I love about being an Anglican is when I go to a diocesan event, I don't just see other Americans. When I go to a diocesan event, I have brothers and sisters there who are from Africa, who are from South America, who are from Asia and from Europe. And I can see visibly how the body of Christ transcends political bounds. And I love the ways in which these brothers and sisters have challenged me, have challenged the way that I tend to think about the world. The love of God has no limits, and the church itself has no limits. And we are called to live in that sort of love. We are called to reject the ideology of the world that wants us to place limits on brotherhood. I often find myself saddened when I drive through the overpasses here, so close to our church, where so many homeless people gather. It's so sad to me how we all have this internal reaction to treat someone who's down on their luck as if in some way they're less than human. But it's important for us to remember, and I always think this when I drive by, that man or that woman out there is somebody's baby. Every single person under that overpass has a mother. And I would like to bet you that if a mother drove by that person today and saw them sitting out there, nothing would keep her away. It doesn't matter how bad they smell, or how dirty they might be, or how psychologically disturbed they might be. That child has that mother's love for the mere fact that he is her child. And if that is the very love that Christ has for each and every one of us, why should we place limits on it? May we learn to love as Christ himself has loved us. Finally, I want to take a look at how our Lord himself ends the passage in our gospel lection. Listen to the words that he says to each and every one of us today. He says, I choose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide. So that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. And this I command you to love one another. Sadly, we hear those words that Jesus says, that whatever we ask in his name, he may give it to us. And we reply to ourselves personally, don't we? I wish I had $1 million. I wish these bills were paid. I wish this, I wish that, I wish this, I wish that. And it's all for me, 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 me. Have we heard what Christ said? Did he say that we're to ask for whatever we want for ourselves, or did he ask us to love? And what is love, once again, but the entire orientation of the self to the good of another? What he's asking is not that we ask for $1 million, but that we ask for the good of another. That we work for the good of another. And not only that, but listen to the words that he says. When he says, I choose you, I appointed you, I fear that our own modern English ears don't hear that as we're supposed to. Because what we do is we personalize it once again. We turn those yous into second person singular pronouns. When if you read it in Greek, they're second person plural pronouns. He's not saying, I appointed you individually and I chose you individually. He's saying, I appointed you all as a church to bear fruit and for that fruit to abide. And I think that this is something very important for us to remember. I always get saddened every week because our church is situated in a rather poor neighborhood. We have people who come to the door all the time with various needs. And I firmly believe that the church should never let anyone walk away empty-handed. But nonetheless, to hand out a couple of bucks here, to hand out a couple of bucks there might change someone's day, but it doesn't change anybody's life. When Jesus speaks to us and says, I appointed you all, he's saying that most of our problems with poverty and suffering are not individual problems, but are societal problems. That our society perpetuates states of injustice with which we should not be tolerant. And that the fixes that must be applied to these societal problems are not individual fixes, but are societal fixes. That require all of us to be active, and to work, and to think, and to act, and to volunteer, and to vote for the good of the other, instead of the good of the self. We are called to apply the love of God in the depths of our life, and in the depths of our society, and to change our world for the better. And note what he says, that you would bear fruit, and that that fruit should abide. Lest we begin to think that this is an impossible task. Think of all the good that the church has done in the past. Many of the justices and the just frames of society that we take for granted today are resulted because of the work of the church all throughout the Middle Ages. Do you know where hospitals began? Hospitals began in monasteries. Many of the great works of art and of literature of the ancient world have been preserved. Why? Because monasteries. The Christian world all throughout the Middle Ages created for us the grounds of the good societal frameworks that we take for granted today. It's because Christians of the past took this seriously that we have hospitals, and that we have health care, and that we have hospitable organizations. My friends, it is our call to take up the good work, to carry on the baton and pass it on, to take the challenge that faces us with the injustices that we experience in our world today, to not close our eyes to them, to not push someone away as someone else's child, but to live out the same love with which Christ himself has grasped us, to become Christ in our world, to live our lives with a total orientation to the good of the other. To take to heart Jesus' words, greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends. To hear our Lord's words when he says we love because he first loved us. And to hear Christ speaking to each of us when he says, I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide. In the name of the Father, and of the Son,